What's going on, guys? So at the tail end of my last fishing trip, I noticed the trim motor on my Yamaha F200 started getting louder and louder as the day was progressing. Now, as soon as I started hearing that noise, I recognized it immediately because I've had a trim motor go out on me in the past. So then I started thinking to myself, please don't go out on me out here on the water. Allow me to get this boat back on the trailer and get it back home. That way I can properly service that motor or replace it or whatever it does need. And unfortunately, that didn't happen to me. It did go out on the water and I had to limp it back on the trailer and do a couple of things to get it road ready to be able to trailer back home. So what I'm gonna do in today's video is I'm gonna walk you through what those procedures are, what are those steps to get this motor in a safe stowed position. That way you can trailer it back home. And just the same as when you get home, what type of motor do you need to order? How do you install it? What type of procedures are in place for just kind of getting this little project knocked out and getting you back on the water. So all this coming up. All right, so full disclosure, I have already replaced everything on this boat and I am just about to be finished with it now, but this will be a walkthrough on everything that you need to do to get the motor stowed safely, as well as to replace the trim on this motor. All right, so when I pulled my boat onto the trailer and pulled the trailer out of the water, this is the exact orientation that the motor was as it's hanging off the back of the boat. Now, one of the biggest things you have to realize is once it's fully articulated down like this, there is not much ground clearance at all, maybe 3 or 4 inches at the most. That 3 or 4 inches is just enough to catch on almost anything out there on the road and cause serious damage to your very expensive lower unit. So what you guys need to do is you need to get this motor up in the air, that way it'll clear the ground, and find some way to lock it and stow it into position. Well, Yamaha has a very simple procedure that I'm going to show you guys right now, and it will allow you to do this and get this motor back home safely. So if you notice here on the left side of your motor where the motor hangs onto the transom, there's a little symbol here. It's got kind of a motor kicked up with an arrow pointing counterclockwise. If you look down into that little space there, you'll notice there is a slot for a flat bladed tool, screwdriver, Gerber, whatever you guys want to use. What you're going to do is you're going to stick your flat bladed screwdriver into that slot and start turning that thing counterclockwise, roughly 2 to 3 revolutions. Now, once you've turned that thing a couple of times, reach down here onto the very bottom and start pulling on the lower unit. Once you've released the pressure that's in that hydraulic mechanism, the motor should start to move. Once the motor starts to move, that's it. Don't turn that thing counterclockwise anymore. Everything's opened up and it's now ready to be lifted up into place. Now, here's where it comes in handy to have someone that fishes with you, or possibly find someone at the ramp that has a strong back, because you're going to need that, because these Yamaha F200s are very, very heavy motors. It actually took me and another buddy a minute or two to lift this thing up into place because it was extremely heavy. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to apply power. I'm going to just lift this thing up into place, and I'm going to show you what the next steps are once you and your buddy do manually lift it up. All right, so while you guys have the motor lifted up in the air, you now need to reach over here to the kickstand and you want to articulate it into the down position. Now, as you swing this thing down, you'll notice right here, there's pretty much a slot, one single little groove right here. You want that kickstand to stay or to center up somewhere in between the grooves over here on this side, and ensure that it's also swung around on this side. Now, with these Yamaha F200s, as you turn one side, the other side does turn. But if you have a motor that works a little bit differently, you may have to also visually inspect that this side is turned and is kind of lined up and centered up with that groove right there. Now, once you've done that, then you just basically let the motor down just a slight little bit and allow it to rest in that groove. Then take your flat blade screwdriver, and this is a step that you guys cannot forget. You have to go back into this little slot right here, stick your tool back in there, and you need to turn this clockwise to the right until it completely tightens up. And what that's going to do is it's going to close the valve down inside this hydraulic arm and not allow any hydraulic fluid to pass up or down in the cylinder. Now, the reason that is important to do is this is just a little aluminum arm right here. This is not meant to be used as a towing mechanism or to be used as you're towing this boat down the road. This is just basically a maintenance kickstand. If you don't close the valve off and you have all the weight of this heavy motor sitting on this little aluminum piece, you're setting yourself up for disaster. If this little arm does collapse or something shears in here, this entire motor with all this nice fancy casting is going to come slamming down and it's going to cause a lot of expensive damage to the motor. So make sure you do tighten this thing all the way down to the right before you put this thing in drive and start heading back home. All right, so now once you get the boat home, you got a couple options. One, you can buy the replacement trim motor for yourself and do it that way, or you can reach out to a specialist, whoever you prefer to use, and just have them order the parts for you, come install it, maybe just have them get the parts and you do the work yourself. Really, it's up to you and your skill level. Now, me personally, I'm good at some DIY stuff. I have a good mechanical working knowledge. I normally do a lot of service work on my motors and boats as well. So I was okay with tackling this task on my own, but I didn't want to scroll through a bunch of books and websites and try to figure out what motor I needed to order. I wanted to honestly just call a professional, have him give me the correct motor, and that would allow me to install this. So I reached out to my buddy Steve at Marine Maintenance Handyman and gave him the serial number of my motor, and he was able to get all the parts ordered for everything to kind of accomplish this job, and it was an extremely easy process. All right, so if you decide to go with the route that I did, you just want the parts so you can do the maintenance on it yourself. Now, what you're gonna get straight out of the box is a brand new black motor. You're also gonna get a round silicone seal that goes in between the plate here and the motor itself. And the motor is gonna have two wires, a green wire and a blue wire coming off of the end. Now, as far as the tools goes, it's very simple, guys. You wanna keep that same flat bladed screwdriver because you're gonna need to release the pressure off of the motor here once you get working. Take some sort of a simple socket wrench with an extension handle, deep socket 10 millimeter, as well as a short socket 10 millimeter. And you're also going to want a wobbler attachment for that socket wrench. And the last thing you need is just a very basic Phillips screwdriver. All right, so now that we got our tools set out, we're ready to replace this thing. So the first thing we have to do is we have to remove the old motor and pull the wires out. Now, this motor is held down by 4 10 millimeter bolts that go all the way around. Just use your deep well socket to take those 3 out. These are actually very, very easy. The one that's difficult is obviously the one that's in the back hidden. If you see, there's kind of a weird transitional angle right here that won't allow you to get a straight socket down in there. So that's why you have to use a tool that's like this. Now, you see how this kind of has a little wobble angle to it. It allows you to really get into some weird, funky, quirky angles. This is what's going to allow you to get at that bolt in the very, very back. But once you take the bolts all the way out, the motor will just kind of fall out. Also, a little bit of the trim fluid or the hydraulic fluid is going to come out as well. So it's a good time to throw some sort of a piece of cardboard down the bottom. That way you can catch that hydraulic fluid and it doesn't stain your concrete or kill your grass, whatever surface you're working on. Then you're going to want to just kind of take a pair of cutters, cut the old wire that's right here, remove the old motor, and retain those 4 bolts. Now, take a wire brush and kind of clean up those bolts if there's any corrosion on them, but you will be needing to reuse those bolts. So once that motor is out of the way and this wire is pushed through this hole, go ahead and pull the existing wire out of the way. That hole is going to be nice and clean. There won't be anything in there, and there won't be any motor here. This is a good opportunity to take a rag and kind of wipe anything down if you notice any grime or grit that might be in that space, because you want to make sure you do have a clean surface as you put the new trim motor back into that space. But what you're going to do is you're going to take that round plastic ring, you're going to apply it to the very bottom of this trim motor here, take your new motor, set it into place. Don't forget to put dielectric grease on the end of those bolts. Then hand tighten these 3 bolts right here in the very back. Pull out your wobbler tool again, hand tighten those things down nice and easy. Once everything is hand tight, then go ahead and turn a little bit of pressure on those as well, and go ahead and torque those down. Now, I didn't look at the torque specs, but if you were interested, you can definitely look up the torque specs for these right here on the Yamaha's website. But I just went fairly tight, not overly tight, because I didn't want to bust anything or strip out these metallic threads. Now, once your trim motor is in, go ahead and take your brand new wire and run it through this hole right here, and just allow that wire to hang down on the ground like that. We're not going to lower the motor yet and start connecting everything up inside the motor, because we want to make sure that we fill this cylinder here, or the reservoir here, with our new trim fluid. So in order to do that, just take this little plastic cap off and start squirting in new trim hydraulic fluid. Squirt it in all the way until it starts to honestly come out, then put that cap on. Now at this point, we can come back over to the other side of the motor, take our flat bladed screwdriver again, back into that same slot, turn it to the left and release the pressure that is in this hydraulic cylinder right here. Now, once you've released the pressure and the motor can move a little bit, this is where, again, it takes the help of a second person, or if you're comfortable with lifting and lowering this motor on your own, go for it. But you just basically want to pick up just a little bit to relieve pressure off of that kickstand, fully swing this kickstand back, articulate it back into the stowed position, and then easily lower this motor back down. Don't let it slam down, because again, you could damage some of the cast metal parts here, but just lower it right back down into place, and that will allow you now to gain access under the cowling to get to the rest of the wiring. All right, so removing this cowling is very easy. You have one right here on this back side, you have one on the other side on the same position, and then your third and final one is right here up front. Once those three are released, you can then lift up on your cowling. Very, very easily take it off. Try not to drop it or scratch it. Set it in the grass. Set it on a piece of cloth. Set it somewhere to just honestly protect it, because that thing right there is crazy expensive. So once you've done that, it now allows you to get into the motor, and I'll show you how these wires need to be routed. All right, so what you'll do now is you'll take that wire that is exiting out of this hole that was just dangling on the ground like I talked about. Take that wire, and you're going to want to follow the old wires. What you can do if you want is you can just take the new wire and the old wire, tape them together, and then as you pull it through this little kind of a rubber boot right here, you'll pull them both through together. That seems to be a very easy way. If not, you can just remove the old wire from here and push the new wires into that space, and it'll all work just the same. But all you're going to do once you get into the space where the wires are is you're just going to trace the old wire with the new wire. Again, everything is going to line up green and blue, so just kind of follow that same path all the way around until you get into, or until you see where everything kind of goes and hides behind this black plastic piece right here. Now, removing this black plastic piece is extremely simple. Take your Phillips head screwdriver, and you'll notice you have two screws, one up in the top right, one in the bottom left. Down here on the bottom left, just turn it a couple times to loosen it, and the one up here on the top right, go ahead and turn it all the way out. And what that will do is it will allow this black plastic plate to articulate out of the way, and it'll still retain that screw, so you have a less chance of dropping a screw down into the motor. Now, here's pretty much what the screw looks like. It's just a basic Phillips head screw. But once this thing is out of the way, you can now get access into all these wire terminals that do terminate into pretty much this bus bar that's in here. So what you want to do is follow the green wire in just like this, pop this little dust cap off, take your 10mm wrench and pull the 10mm bolt off, and that will remove the green one. And then you're going to do the exact same thing following the blue into the same spot here, remove that dust cap, remove that 10mm bolt, and remove the old blue wire. Then you just do everything in reverse, put your brand new wires in, tighten everything down hand tight. Don't over tighten these with your socket wrench at 10mm, and that's it. And this is all ready to go back into place. Articulate that back up, put your screw back on, ensure that none of your wires are kinked. Everything is kind of in here nice and fluid. Everything's it just needs to look the way it was when you first took everything out, and you're pretty much good to go. Then your cowling will go back on, tighten your three little clamps back on, and then we're ready to start pushing some new hydraulic fluid into that new reservoir motor. All right, so once my motor cowling's on, I'll go back to my battery switch, I'll apply power back to the boat, and then I'm gonna come right here to the trim tab switch, and I'm basically just gonna push up on it real quick and make sure that my wiring is correct. If the motor works, then that's a good thing. I know I don't have any issues, and I'm completely done up here underneath the cowling. So then we're really gonna focus our attention to this hydraulic arm and the reservoir down here. So as you lift this thing up, it's not gonna sound as smooth as mine. It's gonna be cracking, it's gonna be popping, and it's gonna be making an absolute terrible noise. And that's just because there's air inside the hydraulic cylinder that's in here. So what we wanna do is we wanna take our dust cap back off again, take that fluid bottle with your hydraulic trim fluid, go ahead and squirt it in until it overflows down onto your piece of cardboard, put the cap back on, and then we're just gonna cycle the motor up and down 2 to 3, 4 times, something like that. And just keep cycling it up and down until you don't hear that popping sound anymore. And everything is now good to go. So again, it should sound like this once everything is done. And just like that, guys, your brand new motor is in. Again, it's a very simple process to be able to do on your own if you have a simple understanding of how tools work and how mechanical knowledge is applied. Also, it helps to have someone that can order the correct part for you. That way you don't buy the wrong one and try to install the wrong one, and then you're kind of stuck in limbo waiting for that new part to come in. And again, that's where you want to reach out to a subject matter expert. Steve, thank you so much for helping me get the parts for this Yamaha F200, as well as the other parts and the other work that you've been doing. For those of you out there at home, I do a ton of fishing, and right now I'm gearing up for getting everything ready to take this boat offshore quite frequent. The cobia season is about to kick off. Mahi are going to be kicking off as well. The Kings and the Spanish are going to be returning to some of those nearby wrecks and reefs. And I got a little punch list of some things that I've got going on with the boat that I'm replacing, just to make sure this thing is in full mechanical working order. You know, stuff like this, like raw water wash down pumps and all kinds of crap like that. So that's all I got for today. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did get some value out of it, please don't forget to hit that thumbs up on the way out, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care, everyone. God bless.